It's time for the Coach Groves Show, where we sit down with the head coach of the Darlington Tigers football team and talk about all things Darlington School football. Now we go live to Matt Davis and Ian Griffin, who are standing by with Coach Wayne Groves.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're glad to have you with us tonight for the second edition of the Coach Groves Show, where we talk all things Darlington football with the head Tiger himself, Wayne Groves. And Matt, we've got a ball game to discuss with the coach this week. We got to see the Tigers in action last Friday.
Indeed we did. And, Coach, the first thing we want to say is congratulations on the first win, man. That's super exciting.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a really special night. 21 years of hard work to be able to get to that point and to be able to get a win in your first ball game is very special.
So I got to know, how did it feel running out there with your team for the first time as a head coach?
Really, really exciting. That's just the whole day was just built up with anticipation. And I think the kids were ready to play and ready to go out there and show off what they could do. And I was definitely ready to get out there and lead them. So it was a good time.
All right, man. Well, I guess we'll just go ahead and jump into our questions about last week's game. And the first thing that we want to talk to you about is just give us your general assessment on the effort from your team.
Well, obviously we won 48-24, and you want to give up less points than that. But what I took out of the game was that the kids played extremely hard. And I think that's what Darlington football's been about over the years, and it's one of the things I talk to the kids about constantly, and it's one of the things that we definitely talked about pregame wise was. Darlington doesn't always have the fastest, we don't always have the strongest, don't always have the biggest kids, but what you can control is how hard you play and how hard you play for each other, this school, this community. And I held up the helmet right there and talked to him about that white helmet with that purple paw and what that means to so many people that have played Darlington football and what it means to that community. And I challenged them to make sure we play hard for 48 minutes every time we step on the field. So we did that. I looked on the film and I graded it hard to try to find a kid that loafed or pulled up short, couldn't find it. And so even though we didn't always play perfect, we played with great effort and played with great intensity. And so I can coach that type of team, and so I like the direction we're going.
Coach, it's always an adjustment for us. It's our first game of the season, too, up in the booth, so we were getting used to new numbers and kids playing different positions than they were last year. Talk about some of the guys that had to make those changes and how they performed.
Well, one of the things that I do kind of end of the summer-wise is guys with perfect attendance. If a number's open from a graduating senior, or if they want to swap a number with somebody that's willing to swap, I let them do that. So I know last year Sammy Konchesky was number 6 and Demarion was number 2, and so they had some perfect attendance, and so they ended up wanting to swap numbers, so I let them swap. So they're in different numbers this year. So you'll see Demarion in number 6 and Sammy in number 2, and of course you'll see McKay Rush in number 50 and not number 21, and Sam 20 from 28 to 57. So. I think it's a good reward for kids that are perfect attendance during the summer. Call that my Champions Club.
Heck yeah.
Well, Coach, of course, we have the Honeymoon Bakery icing on the cake player of the game every week. And, there's so many great individual efforts that led to a great team effort last week. But the choice we felt like was pretty clear in last week's game. But, Ian, our Honeymoon Bakery icing on the cake.
And would love for you to elaborate on this player's performance, but Sammy Konchesky going out and just lighting it up, 13 of 17 for 171 yards and a touchdown. And then, of course, he also ran for, 94 yards and 3 touchdowns, so 4 touchdowns on the game. We've watched him sit back and wait his turn, and, from what me and Matt saw, we saw him manage the game well and make the right reads most of the time. Now, you're the coach, though, so you can tell us. What did you think of Sammy's performance?
Well, it's very, obviously he's got room to improve, but he did a very good job within the game plan that we had this week. And the first thing Sammy will tell you, too, because he's a very humble kid, he's a hard worker. He was actually our super Tiger, which is basically our fastest, strongest, most athletic kid that, kind of do a test at the end of the summer to kind of judge that. And Sammy won that competition. And so Sammy will be the first one to tell you that he couldn't have done it without his offensive line. And so those guys are up there doing their thing and open up holes for the backs and for Sammy, and giving him time to, throw the football and get it to some other playmakers. So, yeah, it was really I really enjoyed watching how Sammy handled that game, and we expect big things from him in the future as well.
Now, you mentioned you have other awards that you hand out each week. So tell us about this black shirt program that you have.
Okay, so we do give a black shirt award. We actually give 5 of them each week, and that's voted on. The coaches meet at 6 a.m. on Sunday, and so we'll go over some particulars, things for the week. But then one of the things that we are voting on are black shirts. And so we give 5 of them each week. One is given to the offensive and defensive player. Now, we try to give the black shirt is going to be the kid that doesn't always get his name in the newspaper. You know, it's more of a kid that's maybe grinding away and playing his position and playing it perfect that doesn't have the stats. Now, sometimes it may work out that way where it's the same kid, but this particular week it didn't. So we give an offense and defense and a special teams black shirt, which is a jersey. I give them a black jersey. And it's got a skull and crossbones on it that they get to wear every day at practice, because skull and crossbones are pretty cool. So we like that pirate, attacking mentality, So the offensive player black shirt was Aiden Davis, a senior wide receiver, number 13. Aiden Davis on a lot of the big runs we had, big screen plays we had, he's blocking his tail off, 20, 30 yards downfield, getting the job done. And so that was numerous times. And so Aiden earned a black shirt doing that. The defensive black shirt went to Timmy Smith, a senior strong safety, number 20. Timmy, we had, like Noah Duggan had a lot of production, had 11 tackles at Sam linebacker last Friday. But Timmy, we thought he played his position exactly the way it was coached to do. He didn't have many errors, not many what I call non-commits, not playing your position the right way or the way you've been coached to play. So Timmy Smith got the black shirt there. Special teams, we give one. We got it to Jack Chandler. We had some great special teams play. Aiden Davis, I think he ended up having 3 tackles on special teams. But Jack Chandler had 100% perfect snaps on PATs, 100% perfect snaps on punt, and covered well on punts. So Jack Chandler got the black shirt on special teams. And then we give one for a offense and defensive scout simulation team of the week. So that went last week to Gus Twingy, a junior linebacker and offensive line who we couldn't even get him out from playing scout. He's just in there grinding away, trying to make us better and give us the look that we need to be successful on Friday night. And then on defense, the scout went to Henry Ledbetter, who's a sophomore. He's a starting strong side defensive end. But even when it's time to go simulation D, he's out there and he's giving the first offense. Just raising Cain at him. And so, Henry's efforts gave him the black shirt for that. So it's a way just to honor kids and keep them motivated for practice and give them something to work forward. And that'll be a competition that we'll take out throughout the year. And so at the end of the year at the banquet, the kid with the most black shirts, top 2 kids will get an award for that. So it's something we want to celebrate for those kids that don't always get their name in the newspaper and that are grinding it out to help the team.
Coach, I got to ask you this, and this has nothing to do necessarily with the subject, but you mentioned the design and it being related to Pirates. Are you by chance, or were you a Mike Leach fan?
I got to meet Coach Leach going to some clinics probably about 15 years ago. I'd go to some of those Tony Franklin air raid clinics, and some of that Tony Franklin passing game, it comes from the Mike Leach and era as well. And so Mike would speak at some of those. And so, yeah, of course, if you're a football fan, you got to love Mike Leach. And so, yeah, that pirate mentality he has, is something that we try to incorporate to the program too.
That's awesome. He was a national treasure.
Oh, absolutely. And the state of Mississippi was much watch football with Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach coaching at those universities. So definitely a loss. Jumping back to the game, I did want to ask you about some of the other players' performances. We saw the offense really do a good job of getting your playmakers the ball in space, and then I thought Miles Twyman was he ran the ball hard every time he got a chance to carry it. Just tell us about some of the other performances that stuck out in your mind.
Well, we thought up front, we thought Jack Chandler played really well at center, and he's playing over on the defensive side too. So he's one of those guys that played both ways. Miles obviously ran the ball very hard. He had over 100 yards rushing. Demarion, I think he was right underneath 100. And then Sammy ran the ball very well. And that's the kind of thing we want to make folks cover the whole field. And so, be able to throw the ball out there, the receivers like Talon and Hendricks Jones and Aiden Davis, and then be able to run it, and with Sammy pull it on some of the read, power reads and zone read stuff. It makes our offense really, really go. On the defensive side, as we talked about, Timmy Smith played really well at strong safety. I thought Noah Duggan played really well. He had a lot of production, 11 tackles. And then just throughout the game, rolling kids in, when we ended up grading the film, we had 23 kids that made a tackle or assist on our roster. And we're a 50-man roster, so we're not a huge roster, so that means a lot of kids are contributing on Friday night. So that's always a good thing. And a lot of those kids are young kids too. So we're proud of that.
I know one player that made some big-time plays in the game that's going to get talked a lot about this season as a newcomer to the team. But if you didn't know his name going into the game last week, everybody knows it now, and that's Sam Wooten. Made some great grabs, also recovered a fumble throughout the game, and he made an impact on both sides of the ball. So what can you say about his contribution and the expectations, for him, coming into the season and after the game?
Well, he's my Mike linebacker, first of all. And so, that's the guy that my defense runs through. And so he's got to be a leader, which he is. He's got to be the smartest player on the field. And we're still working on, getting his mental aspect of the game. Not that he's not handling everything I'm throwing at him, but we want to keep pushing him to handle more as far as in-game adjustments and checks and things like that. So as he gets a little more comfortable, I'm going to start putting a little more on him. And then on offense, we're putting him at tight end. We're putting him at fullback. So we're expecting him to block. We're expecting him to catch the ball in the backfield, and we're expecting him to take some deep shots sometimes. And so some of those, we caught Christian Academy of Knoxville in a kind of a bad coverage, and we had a mismatch in a certain little empty formation that we were in, and able to get Sam up the seam a couple of times for some easy scores. So, we're going to keep expecting those big things out of Sam. He's a great kid.
Well, any final comments about the game before we take our first break?
No, all in all, I was pleased with, again, how the effort's gone. We've worked really hard this week on cleaning up some of the mistakes that we made, and we had a good film session on Saturday. And so, we're just looking forward to this Friday. We closed that door on Saturday morning, so we're moving on to Sonoraville.
Well, we're glad to have you with us on the show. This is the Coach Grove Show. When we come back, we've got a new segment that we're going to, introduce to the show this week, and it's called the Getting to Know Coach Groves segment of the show. So we got a question that we're going to pose to him every week and kind of get to know him outside of just coaching football. But today it is a sports-related question, so that's coming up after our break. But we're glad to have you with us. This is the Coach Grove Show, and we shall return.
Shop for your next car, truck, or SUV at Riverside Auto Group. Check out riversideautogroup.com today to browse their selection, or visit with them in person at Riverside Chevrolet Buick GMC in Rome, Riverside Toyota in Rome, and the all-new Riverside Buick GMC Cadillac in Cartersville. Locally owned and operated by the Welburn family since 1974. That's Riverside Auto Group. Visit riversideautogroup.com.
All right, we welcome you back to the Coach Grove Show. And as promised before our break, we're going to launch into the Getting to Know Coach segment of the program. And this week, we're going to throw you a softball here, Coach. But we got to know, what is your favorite sports movie of all time?
All right. Well, just to say, what's your favorite sports movie? That's pretty tough. That's a pretty tough question. So, let me see. Let's narrow it down to like 3, and then I'll pick from there. All right. So there's a lot of good sports movies out there, and surprisingly, probably my favorite's probably not a football movie, if surprisingly or not. But you got to throw out movies like Hoosiers. I mean, what a great movie that would be up there. The Rocky movies, which I would say Rocky 4, Rocky 3.
Yeah.
Then Rocky 1 in that order, if you had to do that. Wow. Karate Kid, I'm a 80s guy, so Karate Kid's definitely in there. Bloodsport, maybe the original MMA, and then maybe Rudy, So let's see. Favorite sports movie? I'm going to go Hoosiers. I'm just old school Hoosiers.
It's hard not to. I mean, Gene Hackman kills it in that film.
Yeah.
So.
What's your favorite, Ian?
Well, you're putting me on the spot
yeah,
now.
I didn't tell you I was going to do that.
It's tough to pick. It really is. But Hoosiers is up there. Rocky 4 is definitely the best Rocky, and I agree with the order of 3-1 from there, for sure. But I mean, if the Karate Kid's in here as a sports movie, I went through 3 copies of that VHS as a kid, so that would have to be at the top. But one that me and Coach were talking about before the show, Little Giants, man. I want to see Darlington run the annexation of Puerto Rico before the season's over.
For me, baseball, I would say Major League for a comedy, a little bit more serious movie. I'd go Field of Dreams. although I know a lot of people would throw the natural into that
Yep.
mix, probably with that one, maybe Bull Durham. For football, for me, it's Friday Night Lights. I absolutely love the halftime speech that Billy Bob Thornton gives, during that particular movie. That part particularly gives me goosebumps.
All the Right Moves with Tom Cruise. That was one. I love that. That was one I watched when I was a kid.
Hockey, it's going to be Slapshot. Don't watch that with your kids if you never heard of it. Some salty language in that one. But, yeah, those are some of my faves. But
Excellent.
anyway, well, that was the Getting to Know You segment. One of the things that we wanted to talk to you about, Coach, is the fact that obviously if you turn on the news right now, probably the lead story is talking about the heat that's taking place. And so that's something that all high school football teams have to deal with this time of year, but it's been exceptionally hot this week. So what's that look like in terms of protocols and trying to get the work in this week?
Well, I think the biggest misconception with that is people think that it's based off the heat index or the temperature or what it feels like outside, but it's really not. It's temperature, but it's also humidity, and so to start making accommodations to your practice, Georgia High School Association has laid out guidelines that I think are really, really good guidelines to follow. So basically what you're looking at is a wet bulb reading that's got to be taken about every 15 minutes before practice and during practices. So when the temperature is extremely high and the humidity is extremely high, that wet bulb is going to be high. If the temperature is high and the humidity is low, the wet bulb will not be that high. So in order to start having to accommodate and take time off of practice or to modify, maybe not going full pads or going pro pads or shells, then that temperature's got to be high with that high humidity. And so Monday this week, we were normal, good to go practice. Tuesday we had a little bit of an issue. We reached what called level 2 wet bulb, which if I'm reading this correctly, is 87 to 89.9. And we have a athletic trainer at every practice, Donnie Brown, who works for Darlington, but also is a physical therapist over at Atrium Health. So Donnie's constantly checking that wet bulb to make sure we're in the guidelines. So Tuesday, the accommodations were with that wet bulb being, I think it was right at 89, that we had to be minimum 2-hour practice and that we had to be in pro pads, which is basically for us, that's helmets and shoulder pads and no pants or knee pads or anything like that. So if it gets above 92, that is no outdoor practice whatsoever. You got to be completely indoors. And then if it's between 90 and 92, then your minimum or your maximum 1 hour outside with 20-minute breaks. So you basically get 40 minutes if it's in that range, and you can only be in helmets. So today we were actually in that range, and so we chose to go inside instead. That way we could at least put on our pro pads, our helmet, and our shoulder pads, and we cut time and period out of practice and got the bare minimum of what we needed to get done. But so that's some accommodations we've had to make, and again, I think those guidelines are safe. They're there to protect kids, and even I tell our kids, even though this might not be ideal, we got to make the best out of this situation and get the most out of it, because we're not the only ones having to do this.
No question about it. That's always one of the interesting aspects of the high school football season, because when you get started, it's hot for a long period of time, and it feels like it's almost playoff time before you actually feel like, hey, this is football weather. But that's just, I guess, what it is, playing football in the southeast in the state of Georgia.
Yeah, and you talked about your trainer. The trainers were busy Friday night.
Oh, man.
A lot of cramps
Tons
out
of
there.
cramps.
Me and Matt we're keeping a cramp count. We lost it.
We were looking for
Yeah.
a sponsor so that we could have a sponsored segment of the broadcast of the game. This cramp was brought to you by, I think we made reference to that a little bit earlier, but something that you had to deal with this past week. But
Yeah, I mean, and I think we won that battle. They think they had 8 kids that cramped throughout the game, and we had 2 that cramped in the second quarter. And then we got some electrolytes in them. We got them some salted Gatorade at halftime, and I'm a believer in it. There may not be any scientific fact behind it, but every player I've had over the years that has taken a big mouthful of mustard has stopped cramping. And so both kids that cramped in the second quarter, they didn't cramp in the third and fourth quarter. But I don't know if it just shocks the body so much, or if the salt and the sodium in the mustard actually goes to work, but it works.
I got a family member, and I didn't know this was a thing, but this particular family member drinks pickle juice.
Yeah.
when that takes place. I never heard that.
Yeah, it works the same.
Yeah, that's wild.
I'm not a fan of mustard. I would have a hard time taking a mouthful of mustard, even if I had a horrible cramp. That would be tough. It's like
I'm just glad you didn't say mayonnaise.
Me and Matt don't like mayonnaise either. And the Duke's Mayo Bowl, I was like, if I was a coach, I would have to turn that bowl bid down. It's like I'm not taking a risk of a mayo bath. Can't do it.
So the Mississippi Mustard Bowl, you couldn't make it.
No, couldn't do it. Sorry, guys.
The best reference I've heard naming mayonnaise as far as, condiments is concerned is somebody called it the devil's condiment the other day, which I appreciate that greatly.
There you go.
Well, getting a little off track here. We're going to take our last break here of the program, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about big game coming up this week, and that is going to be another home game at Chris Hunter Stadium as Sonoraville Phoenix comes calling, and that's going to be interesting to talk about. So we're looking forward to that, but we're glad to have you with us here on this edition, the second ever of the Coach Grove Show on our YouTube channel, also our Facebook live feed, and then you can listen to it ahead of our broadcast on Friday nights. We get started with this program at 6:45. You can also watch it on the video as well. So a lot of ways to check out this content. But we're glad to have you with us today because we are live, and there's just nothing like being live. So we're going to take a break. We're glad you're with us. We'll be back for our final segment with Coach Groves. Back in moments.
Shop for your next car, truck, or SUV at Riverside Auto Group. Check out riversideautogroup.com today to browse their selection or visit with them in person at Riverside Chevrolet Buick GMC in Rome, Riverside Toyota in Rome, and the all-new Riverside Buick GMC Cadillac in Cartersville. Locally owned and operated by the Welburn family since 1974. That's Riverside Auto Group. Visit riversideautogroup.com.
All right, we welcome you back into the Coach Grove Show, and our final segment is going to be all about the upcoming opponent. It's going to be the Sonoraville Phoenix this week, and I know one of the familiar things about this particular matchup is that you're going to be coaching against one of your former teammates from high school. Denver Pate has been the coach over at Sonoraville for a number of years now. He graduated from Pepperell in 1998. You graduated in 99. So you guys spent a lot of time together back during the high school days playing football and baseball, you mentioned, too.
Yep. Me and Denver grew up together, and, of course, in the coaching world, he's known that he does a great job. He gets his team ready, and, we played football and baseball together in high school, and so – there's a little extra motivation there. You don't want to lose to your buddy, and so I know Denver will have his team ready to play. He's a good offensive mind. He's been coaching a long time, and he's built a solid program there at Sonoraville. So we have a lot of respect for him.
And of course, I know one of the things that every team wants to do in the non-region schedule is get your guys prepared to go up against tough competition once you get into region, and then if you get to the next part of the season and playing in the playoffs. And that's one of the things that I know Darlington's never shied away from is playing really quality opponents there at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, with Christian Academy of Knoxville, good solid team out of Tennessee, and now we get to play a 4A opponent, Sonoraville, that's been in the playoffs quite a bit. So, those going to help us get our team ready. We'll find out if we're getting better, or we'll find out if we're staying the same for sure.
Matt and I have gotten to see Sonoraville play several times, but they're known to have some serious athletes. What are some of the players that you're going to be keeping your eyes on and are preparing for this week?
All right, offensively, the quarterback's number 17, Jackson Pate. It's Denver's son, Denver's oldest son, and he's a really good player. I think last week he was 20 for 24, threw for about 271 yards and a few touchdowns. So, he's doing a really good job. He's really efficient in the offense. Obviously, him and his daddy are on the same page, so that's going to be quite a challenge. Up front, their best offensive lineman, I think, is number 77, Corbin Stevens. He's 6'3", 240 senior. And then they got a good running back, Wyatt Key, 5'9". He's about 200 pounds, and he runs the ball very hard. And then they have a tight end, Cayman Reynolds, who's about 6'3", about 205, and they use him kind of as an H-back type guy. They'll split him out as wide out. They'll put him in at tight end and using it kind of a sniffer fullback type deal. So we'll have to know where he is at all times.
One of the things I noticed, I was looking at the roster and their coaching staff, and one of the names jumped out at me. I know, Ian, you'll appreciate this. We're both Georgia Tech fans, But Kenny Cooper is one of the assistant coaches on this team who played at Georgia Tech a few years ago under Paul Johnson, and I think he might have been there part of the Jeff Collins era. But they've got some experienced guys on their coaching staff as well. Well, what do you think are going to be the biggest challenges, Coach, of going up against this team coming up this weekend?
Well, Sonoraville's got about an 85-man roster. So, one of the things that, we got to do is we got to try to keep our guys fresh. They're going to be able to basically play two platoon and play offense, defense. And we play a few guys both ways. And so we've got to be selective on how we sub guys and where we play guys in certain situations of the ball game and do the best we can to keep guys fresh into the fourth quarter.
Now, you mentioned some of the things you're working on cleaning up this week. What are the things you want to see from your team as far as their improvement on the field?
Well, obviously, you're never going to be able to tackle well. Last week we missed a few too many tackles for me, so that's been a point of emphasis this week. Had a couple of formation mess-ups, not having the right personnel groupings in at certain times, so we got to do a better job of communicating formations as they're signaled in. So those would be two. You never want to shoot yourself in the foot, and you always want to make sure that you're finishing a tackle, finishing a play once you arrive to the ball.
Well, we're glad to have you with us for the second ever edition of the Coach Grove Show. We're going to start winding things down here in just a couple of moments. We want to make sure that everybody knows that this show is going to be live each and every week, Wednesday rather, at 7 o'clock on our YouTube channel for WLAQ and also our Facebook live feed from the WLAQ Rome Facebook page. And this has just been a real pleasure the first couple of weeks, Coach. We appreciate you. I know I said this last week, but we really appreciate you giving us some time every week and let people know what's going on with the team and get the opportunity to get all the information about what's going on with Darlington football.
Yeah, I think it's a great deal. A lot of Darlington football fans out there. It's good to promote the team. Celebrate some kids that are doing a lot of positive things, and so anytime we can do that, we want to do it.
No question about it. Anything else you want to make sure we cover before we wrap up?
Looking forward to Friday night, Chris Hunter Stadium.
Well, I guess how we could wrap this thing up is probably how we're going to wrap it up every week by saying nothing like a Tiger on a Friday night, man. Just a couple of days away for Toe to Meat Leather back at Chris Hunter Stadium, and nice to have another home game as you kick off the season. So Darlington and Sonoraville coming up. And this week, I know last week the game kicked off at 7 o'clock, but it's 7:30 kickoff this week, correct?
7:30. It'll be 7:30 from here on out.
I got you.
Matt called me in a panic last Friday. So.
Yeah, I have to admit, it's one of those things after you've been doing this for a long time, there are certain things that you do take for granted that maybe you shouldn't. And I never looked at the schedule at the game time, and I got a text message from Nathan from Northwest Georgia Media who does the video coverage. And he said, by the way, the game starts at 7. And I sent him a text message back, and I said, scramble mode activated. And I got on the phone. We got it worked out. But everything worked out great. And, of course, the best part of it was the Tigers got a victory, 1-0 to start the season. And now you get ready for week 2. So, again, thank you, Coach, and appreciate everybody tuning in today. And that puts a wrap on this edition of the Coach Grove Show right here on WLAQ YouTube and our Facebook Live feed. Thank you, fellas. Appreciate you guys.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of the Coach Groves Show. We invite you to join us again next week as we discuss all things Darlington football with head coach Wayne Groves. Go Tigers!